Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 706th night, she pursued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the wild Arab mounted horse and made for Baghdad, saying in his mind, 'Tis a fine thing to eat honey fritters. On the honor of an Arab, I will break my fast with honey fritters and naught else. And he rode on till he came to the place where Dalilah was crucified, and she heard him mutter these words. So he went up to her and said to her, Who art thou? Quoth she, I throw myself on thy protection, O Sheikh of the Arabs. And quoth he, Allah indeed protect thee. But what is the cause of thy crucifixion? Said she, I have an enemy, an oilman, who frieth fritters, and I stopped to buy some of him when I chanced to spit, and my spittle fell on the fritters. So he complained of me to the governor, who commanded to crucify me, saying, I adjudge that ye take 10 pounds of honey fritters, and feed her therewith upon the cross. If she eat them, let her go, but if not, leave her hanging. And my stomach will not brook sweet things. Cried the Badawai, By the honor of the Arabs, I depart not for the camp, but that I might taste of honey fritters. I will eat them for you. Quoth she, None may eat them except he be hung up in my place. So he fell into the trap and unbound her, whereupon she bound him in her stead, after she had stripped him of his clothes and turban and put them on. Then covering herself with his burnous, and mounting his horse, she rode to her house, where Zaynab asked her, What meaneth this plight? And she answered, They crucified me, and told her all that had befallen her with the Badawai. This is how I fared with her. But as regards the watchman, the first who woke, roused his companions, and they saw that the day had broken. So one of them raised his eyes and cried, Dalilah! Replied the Badawai, By Allah, I have not eaten all night. Have you brought the honey fritters? All exclaimed, This is a man and a Badawai. And one of them asked him, O Badawai, where is Dalilah, and who loosed her? He answered, 'Twas I. She shall not eat the honey fritters against her will, for her soul abhorreth them. So they knew that the Arab was ignorant of her case, whom she had cozened, and said to the one and the other, Shall we flee, or abide the accomplishment of that which Allah hath written for us? As they were talking, up came the chief of police, with all the folk whom the old woman had cheated, and said to the guards, Arise, loose Dalilah. Quoth the Badawai, We have not eaten tonight. Hast thou brought the honey fritters? Whereupon the Wali raised his eyes to the cross, and seeing the Badawai hung up in the stead of the old woman, said to the watchman, What is this? Pardon, O Lord, tell me what hath happened. We were weary with watching with thee on guard, and said, Dalilah is crucified. So we fell asleep, and when we awoke, we found the Badawai hung up in her room, and we are at thy mercy. O folk, Allah's pardon be upon you. She is indeed a clever cheat. Then they unbound the Badawai, who laid hold of the master police, saying, Allah succor the Caliph against thee. I look to none but thee for thy horse and clothes. So the Wali questioned him, and he told him what had passed between Dalilah and himself. The magistrate marveled and asked, Why dost thou release her? And the Badawai answered, I knew not that she was a felon. Then said the others, O chief of police, we look to thee in the matter of our goods, for we delivered the old woman into thy hands, and she was in thy guard, and we cite thee before the divan of the Caliph. Now, the Emir Hassan had gone to the divan, when in came the Wali with the Badawai and the 5 others, saying, Verily, we are wronged men. Who hath wronged you? Asked the Caliph. So each came forward in turn and told his story, after which the master of police said, O commander of the faithful, the old woman cheated me also, and sold me these 5 men as slaves for 1,000 dinars, albeit they are freeborn. Quoth the prince of the true believers, I take upon myself all that you have lost. Adding to the master of police, I charge thee with the old woman. But he shook his collar, saying, O commander of the faithful, I will not answer for her, for after I had hung her on the cross, she tricked this Badawai, and when he loosed her, she tied him up in her room and made off with his clothes and his horse. Quoth the Caliph, Whom but thee shall I charge with her? And quoth the Wali, Charge Ahmad al-Danaf, for he hath 1,000 dinars a month, and 41 followers at monthly wage of 100 dinars each. So the Caliph said, Hark, Commander Ahmad. At thy service, O Commander of the Faithful, said he. And the Caliph cried, I charge thee to bring the old woman before us. Replied Ahmad, I will answer for her. Then the Caliph kept the Badawai and the 5 with him, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 707th night, she resumed, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the Caliph said to Calamity Ahmad, I charge thee to bring the old woman before us, and he said, I will answer for her, O Commander of the Faithful. Then the Caliph excuse me, kept the Badawai and the 5 with him, whilst Ahmad and his men went down to their hall, saying to one another, How shall we lay hands on her, seeing that there are many old women in the town? And quoth Ahmad to Hasan Shuman, What counsellest thou? Whereupon quoth one of them by name, Alif Kit of al-Jamal, to al-Danaf, Of what dost thou take counsel with Hasan Shuman? Is the pestilent one any great shakes? Said Hasan, O Ali, why dost thou disparage me? By the most great name, I will not company with thee at this time. And he rose and he went out in wrath. Then said Ahmad, O my braves, let every sergeant take 10 men with each to his own quarter, and search for Dalilah. All did his bidding, Ali included, and they said, Ere we disperse, let us agree to rendezvous in the quarter of Al-Khalik. It was noised abroad in the city that Calamity Ahmad had undertaken to lay hands on Dalilah the wily, and Zaynab said to her, O my mother, and thou indeed be a trickster, do thou befool Ahmad al-Danaf and his company. Answered Dalilah, I fear none save Hasan Shuman. And Zaynab said, By the life of my browlock, I will assuredly get thee the clothes of all the 41. Then she dressed and veiled herself, and going to a certain druggist, who had a saloon with 2 doors, salaamed to him, and gave him an ashraf, and said to him, Take this gold piece as a douceur for thy saloon, and let it be me till the end of the day. So he gave her the keys, and she fetched carpets and so forth on the stolen ass, and furnished the place, set on each raised pavement a tray of meat and wine. Then she went out and stood at the door with her face unveiled, and behold, up came Ali Katif al-Jamal and his men. She kissed his hand, and he fell in love with her, seeing her to be a handsome girl, and said to her, What dost thou want? Quoth she, Art thou Captain Ahmad al-Danaf? And quoth he, No, but I am of his company, and my name is Ali Camel-shoulder. Answered she, Whither fare you? And he answered, We go about in quest of a sharkish old woman who hath stolen folks' goods, and we mean to lay hands on her. But who art thou, and what is thy business? She replied, My father was a taverner at Mosul, and he died, and he left me much money. So I came hither for fear of the dignitaries, and asked the people who would protect me, to which they replied, None but Ahmad al-Danaf. Said the men, From this day forth thou art under his protection. And she replied, Hearten me by eating a bit and drinking a sup of water. They consented, and entering, ate and drank till they were drunken, when she drugged them with bang, and stripped them of their clothes and arms, and on likewise she did with the 3 other companions. Presently Calamity Ahmad went out to look for Dalilah, but found her not, neither set eyes on any of his followers, and went on till he came to the door where Zaynab was standing. She kissed his hand, and he looked on her, and fell in love with her. Quoth she, Art thou Captain Ahmad al-Danaf? And quoth he, Yes, who art thou? She replied, I am a stranger from Mosul. My father was a vintner at that place, and he died and left me much money, wherewith I came to the city for fear of the powers that be, and opened this tavern. Master of Police hath imposed a tax on me, but it is my desire to put myself under thy protection, and pay thee what the police would take of me, for thou hast the better right of it. Quoth he, Do not pay him aught. Thou shalt have my protection and welcome. Then quoth she, Please to heal my heart, and eat of my victuals. So he entered, and ate, and drank wine till he could not sit upright. When she drugged him, and took his clothes and arms. Then she loaded her purchase on the Badawai's horse and the donkey boy's ass, and made off with it after she had aroused Ali Katif al-Jamal. Camel Shoulder awoke and found himself naked, and saw Ahmad and his men drugged and stripped. So he revived them with the counter drug, and they awoke and found themselves naked. Quoth Calamity Ahmad, "O lads, what is this? We were going to catch her, and lo, this strumpet hath caught us. How Hassan Shuman will rejoice over us, but we will wait till it is dark and then go away." Meanwhile, Pestilence Hassan said to the hall-keeper, "Where are the men?" And he asked up, and they came naked, and he recited these 2 couplets. Men in their purposes are much alike, but in their issues differences comes to light. Of men some wise are, others simple souls, as of the stars, some dull, and some pearly bright. Then he looked at them and asked, "Who hath played you this trick and made you naked?" And they answered, "We went in quest of an old woman, and a pretty girl stripped us." Quoth Hassan, "She hath done right well." They asked, "Dost thou know her?" And he answered, "Yes, I know her, and the old trot too." Quoth he, "What shall we say to the Caliph?" And quoth he, "O Danaf, do thou shake thy collar before him, and he will say, Who is answerable for her? And if he ask why thou hast not caught her, say thou, We know her not, but charge Hassan Shuman with her. And if he give her into my charge, I will lay hands on her." So they slept that night. And on the morrow they went into the Caliph's divan, and kissed ground before him. Quoth he, "Where is the old woman, O Captain Ahmad?" But he shook his collar. The Caliph asked him why he did so, and he answered, "I know her not. But do thou charge Hassan Shuman to lay hands on her, for he knoweth her, and her daughter also." Then Hassan interceded for her with the Caliph, saying, "Indeed, she hath not played off these tricks because she coveted the folk's stuff, but to show her cleverness, and that of her daughter, to the intent that thou shouldest continue her husband's stipend to her, and that of her father to her daughter. So when thou wilt spare her life, I will fetch her to thee." Cried the Caliph, "By the life of my ancestor, if she restore the people's good, I will pardon her on thine intercession." And said the Pestilence, "Give me a pledge, O Prince of True Believers." Whereupon Al-Rashad gave him the kerchief of pardon. So Hassan repaired to Dalilah's house and called to her. Her daughter Zaynab answered him, and he asked her, "Where is thy mother?" "Upstairs." And he said, "Bid her take the people's goods and come with me to the presence of the Caliph, for I have brought her the kerchief of pardon, and if she will not come with a good grace, let her blame only herself." So Dalilah came down, and tying the kerchief around her neck, gave him the people's goods on the donkey boy's ass and the Badawai's horse. Quoth he, "There remain the clothes of my chief and his men." And quoth she, "By the most great name, 'twas not I who stripped them." Rejoined Hassan, "Thou sayest sooth, it was thy daughter Zaynab's doing, and this was a good turn she did thee." Then he carried her to the divan, and laying the people's good and stuff before the Caliph, set the trot in his presence. As soon as he saw her, he bade throw her down on the carpet of blood, whereat she cried, "I cast myself on thy protection, O Shuman." So he rose, and kissing the Caliph's hand, said, "Pardon, O Commander of the Faithful. Indeed, thou gavest me the kerchief of pardon." Said the Prince of True Believers, "I pardon her for thy sake. Come hither, old woman, what is thy name?" "My name is wily Dalilah," answered she. And the Caliph said, "Thou art indeed crafty and full of guile," when she was dubbed Dalilah, the wily one. Then quoth he, "Why hast thou played all these tricks on the folk, and wearied our hearts?" And quoth she, "I did it not of lust for their goods, but because I had heard of the tricks which Ahmad al-Danaf and Hassan Shuman played in Baghdad, and said to myself, I too will do the like. And now I have returned the folk their goods." But the ass-driver rose and said, "I invoke Allah's law between me and her, for it suffices her not to take my ass, but she must needs egg on the Moorish barber to tear out my eye teeth and fire me on both temples." And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 708th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the donkey boy rose and cried out, I invoke Allah's law between me and her, for it suffices her not to take my ass, but she must needs egg on the barber to tear out my eye teeth and fire me on both temples. Thereupon the caliph bade give him 100 dinars and ordered the dyer the like, saying, Go, set up thy diary again. So they called down blessings on his head and went away. The Badawi also took his clothes and horse and departed, saying, 'Tis henceforth unlawful and forbidden for me to enter Baghdad and eat honey fritters. And the other took their goods and went away. Then said the caliph, Ask a boon of me, O Dalilah. And she said, Verily, my father was governor of the carrier pigeons to thee, and I know how to rear the birds, and my husband was town captain of Baghdad. Now I wish to have the reversion of my husband, and my daughter wisheth to that of her father. The caliph granted both their requests, and said, I ask of thee that I may be portress of thy khan. Now he had built a khan of 3 stories for the merchants to lodge in, and had assigned to its service 40 slaves and also 40 dogs he had brought from the king of Sulaymaniyah. When he deposed him, and there was in the khan a cook slave who cooked for the chattels, and fed the hounds for which he let them collar. Said the caliph, O Dalilah, I will write thee a patent of guardianship of the khan, and if aught be lost therefrom, thou shalt be answerable for it. 'Tis well, replied she, but do thou lodge my daughter in the pavilion over the door of the khan, for it hath terraced roofs, and carrier pigeons may not be reared to the advantage save in an open space. The caliph granted her this also, and she and her daughter removed to the pavilion in question, when Zaynab hung up the 140 dresses of Calamity Ahmad and his company. Moreover, they delivered to Dalilah the 40 pigeons which carry the royal messages, and the caliph appointed the wily one mistress over the 40 slaves, and charged them to obey her. She made the place of her sitting behind the door of the khan, and every day she used to go up to the caliph's divan, lest he should need to send a message by pigeon post, and stay there till eventide, whilst the 40 slaves stood on guard at the khan. And when darkness came on, they loosed the 40 dogs, that they might keep watch over the place by night. Such were the doings of Dalilah the wily one in Baghdad, and much like them were the adventures of Mercury Ali of Cairo. Now, as regards to the works of Mercury Ali, there lived one in Cairo in the days of Salah the Egyptian, who was the chief of the Cairo police, and had 40 men under him, a sharper named Ali, for whom the master of police used to set snares, and think that he had fallen therein. But when they sought for him, they found that he had fled like Zabak or Quicksilver, wherefore they dubbed him Ali Zabak, or Mercury Ali of Cairo. Now one day, as he sat with his men in his hall, his heart became heavy within him, and his breast was straitened. The hall-keepers saw him sitting with frowning face, and said to him, What aileth thee, O chief? If thy breast be straitened, take a turn in the streets of Cairo, for assuredly walking in our markets will do away thy irk. So he rose up and went out and threaded the streets a while, but only increased in cark and care. Presently he came to a wine shop, and said to himself, I will go and drink and make myself drunken. So he entered, and seeing 7 rows of people in the shop, said, Haggai, taverner, I will not sit except by myself. Accordingly, the vintner placed him in a chamber alone, and set strong, pure wine before him, whereof he drank till he lost all his senses. Then he sallied forth again, and walked till he came to the road called Red, whilst the people left the street clear before him, out of fear of him. Presently he turned, and saw a water carrier trudging along with his skin and gugglet, crying out and saying, O exchange, there is no drink but what raisins make, there is no love delight but what of the lover we take, and none sitteth in the place of honour save the sensible freck. So he said to him, Here, give me to drink. The water carrier looked at him, and gave him the gugglet, which he took, and gazing into it, shook it up, and lastly poured it on the ground. Asked the water carrier, Why dost thou not drink? And he answered, saying, Give me to drink. So the man filled the cup a second time, And he took it, and shook it, and emptied it on the ground. And thus he did a third time. Quoth the water carrier, And thou wilt not drink, I will be off. And Ali said, Give me to drink. So he filled the cup a fourth time, and gave it to him, and he drank, and gave the man a dinar. The water carrier looked at him with disdain, and said, belittling him, Good luck to thee. Good luck to thee, my lad. Little folk are one thing, and great folk another. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 709th night, she continued, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the water carrier, receiving the dinar, looked at the giver with disdain, and said, Good luck to thee. Good luck to thee. Little folk are one thing, and great folk another. Now, when Mercury Ali heard this, he caught hold of the man's gaberdine, and drawing on him a poignant of price, such an one as that whereof the poet speaketh in these two couplets. Watered still blade the world perfection calls, drunk with the viper poison foes appalls, cuts lively, burns the blood when in it falls, and picks up gems from the pave of marble halls. Cried to him, O Sheikh, speak reasonably to me. Thy water skin is worth, if dear, 3 dirhams, and the guglets I emptied on the ground held a pint or so of water. Replied the water carrier, 'Tis well. And Ali rejoined, I gave thee a golden ducat. Why then dost thou belittle me? Say me, hast thou ever seen a more valiant than I, or more generous than I? Answered the water carrier, I have indeed seen one more valiant than thou, and eke more generous than thou, for never, since women bear children, was there on earth's face a brave man who was not generous. Quoth Ali, And who is he who deemest braver and more generous than I? Quoth the other, Thou must know that I have a strange adventure. My father was a sheikh of the water carriers, who gave drink in Cairo, and when he died he left me 5 male camels, a he-mule, a shop, and a house. But the poor man is never satisfied, or if he be satisfied, he dieth. So I said to myself, I will go up to Al-Hijaz, and taking a string of camels, bought goods on tick, till I had run in debt for 500 ducats, all of which I lost in the pilgrimage. Then I said in my mind, If I return to Cairo, the folk will clap me in jail for their goods. So I fared with the pilgrim's caravan of Damascus to Aleppo, and thence I went on to Baghdad, where I sought out the sheikh of the water carriers of the city, and finding his house, I went in and repeated the opening chapter of the Koran to him. He questioned me of my case, and I told him all that betided me, whereupon he assigned me a shop, and gave me a water skin and gear. So I sallied forth the morn, trusting in Allah to provide, and went round about the city. I offered the gugglet to one that he might drink, but he cried, I have eaten naught whereon to drink, for a niggard invited me this day, and he set 2 gugglets before me. So I said to him, O son of the sordid, hast thou given me aught to eat, that thou would offer me drink after it? Wherefore wend thy ways, O water carrier, till I have eaten somewhat, then come to give me drink. Thereupon I accosted another, and he said, Allah provide thee. And so I went on till noon without having hansel. And I said to myself, Would heaven I had never come to Baghdad. Presently I saw the folk running as fast as they could, so I followed them, and behold, a long file of men riding 2 and 2, and clad in steel, with double neck rings, and felt bonnets, and burnouses, and swords, and bucklers. I asked one of the van, Whose suit was this? And he answered, That of Captain Ahmad of Al-Danaf. Quoth I, and what is he? And quoth the other, He is the town captain of Baghdad, and her divan, and to him is committed the care of the suburbs. He getteth 1,000 dinars a month from the Caliph, and Hassan Shuman hath the like. Moreover, each of his men draweth 100 dinars a month, and they are now returning to their barrack from the divan. And lo, Calamity Ahmad saw me, and cried out, Give me drink. So I filled the cup and gave it to him, and he shook it and emptied it out like unto thee, and thus he did a second time. Then I filled the cup a third time, and he took a draught as thou didst. After which he asked me, O water carrier, whence comest thou? And I answered, From Cairo. And he, Allah, kept Cairo and her citizens. What may bring thee hither? So I told him my story, and gave him to understand that I was a debtor fleeing from debt and distress. He cried, Thou art welcome to Baghdad. Then he gave me 5 dinars, and said to his men, For the love of Allah, be generous to him. So each of them gave me a dinar, and Ahmad said to him, O Sheikh, what while thou abidest in Baghdad, thou shalt have of us the like every time thou givest us to drink. Accordingly, I paid them frequent visits, and goods ceased not to come to me from the folk, till one day, reckoning up the profit I had made of them, I found it 1,000 dinars, and said to myself, The best thing that thou canst do is return to Egypt. So I went to Ahmad's house, and kissed his hand, and he said, What seekest thou? Quoth I have a mind to depart, and I repeated these 2 couplets. Sojourn of stranger in whatever land is like the castle based upon the wind. The breaths of breezes level all he raised, and so on homeward's way the stranger's mind. I added, The caravan is about to start for Cairo, and I wish to return to my people. So he gave me a she-mule and 100 dinars, and said to me, I desire to send somewhat by thee, O Sheikh. Dost thou know the people of Cairo? Yes, answered I. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my telling of this tale for today, till it be morrow.